Ever wanted to play as a god? Have the ability to cast spells over your enemies to decimate them? Maybe like the ability to create volcanoes or earthquakes in a spot on the map of your choice. How about sending out a plague of locusts, or turning your warriors invisible and protecting them from spells from the enemy shaman? What am I talking about? I'm talking about a game which coined the term God Game. The title itself is revolutionary. The games are adored worldwide and continue to have a cult following to this day. They are arguably one of, if not the greatest, of video games of our time. But it's highly likely that if you're born after the year 2000, you may not have heard of this game, or at the very least, you've probably never played it. The games themselves came out in the late 80s and 90s to much fanfare and are considered generation-defining titles. I'm talking, of course, about Populous. Now, I won't lie to you, I've never played Populous 1 and 2 upon their release. I have since, but I can't pretend that I was playing the games back in their early infancy, as I'd be full on lying to you. They were just a few years before my time. I've played them since, and they are vastly different to Populous 3, or Populous the Beginning, depending on how you refer to the game. In the first two Populous games, that is 1 and 2, you play on a 2D square, and you play as God, hence the genre it spawned, God Game. The first two games are vastly different, and I will make separate videos potentially on 1 and 2. I mean, they certainly deserve their own spot, not really to be combined as one title overall, which is not what I'm intending to do here. The focus really is going to be on Populous the Beginning. It was Populous 3, Populous the Beginning, which introduced me to this monster of a franchise and allowed me to play what is arguably one of the greatest games ever to be produced. And as I mentioned, this will be the focus of today's video, focusing on Populous, the beginning, and the beginning of my love affair with video games. Populous 3 was released way back in 1998, and to be brutally honest, it was probably one of the earliest video games that I ever remember playing, alongside V-Rally on the PlayStation 1. Populous was released by the legendary Bullfrog, and if I haven't raved about them enough, go and see my previous video on Theme Hospital. I will at some stage release an ode to Bullfrog as a much longer video to complete this series, but I'm some way off that, and we'll look to release this later in the year after releasing other videos about other Bullfrog titles. Anyway, back to Populous the Beginning, and I am going to refer to it as Populous the Beginning throughout the rest of the video from here on out. It was the first Populous game released in 3D, and it also marked a shift away from the previous way of playing in a 2D view and a single square with a limited field of view. Now there was an entire world for you to explore, a shaman who represented your own physical being in the game as a god character who could be reincarnated unlimited numbers of time if she died, and could wield the spells to decimate and destroy your enemies. There's 3 enemy tribes you need to contend with in Populous the Beginning: the Matak, the Dakini, and the Kumara. You don't face all of the tribes in every single level, but there are numerous levels where you do need to defeat all 3 of them. There doesn't seem to be any discernible difference between the tribes when playing them. They are simply separated by their tribal colours, red, yellow, and green. The purpose of the game is to defeat the enemy tribe, or tribes depending on how many you come up against, on a specific level. You're required to kill every last follower of that tribe and their shaman before lightning strikes and the tribe and reincarnation circle disappears from the map. You'll need to use a combination of your shaman and her spells alongside your fighters, who can be a mixture of warriors, fire warriors, preachers, spies, or braves. You can train these different types of followers by stealing the technology from enemy vaults during certain levels as the game progresses. I'll go into more detail on this shortly. Moving quickly onto the buildings, you steal the technology for this in the same fashion as the followers. These buildings will allow you to train certain types of warriors or build certain modes of transport, such as balloons or boats, which have a major impact on your ability to attack your enemies in vastly different ways. And going back to the followers, you have warriors, who are the elite fighters within your ranks. These men could easily fight in a 5-on-1 situation with braves, and they often come out on top. They are the absolute must when attempting to raid an enemy settlement and in defending your own borders. Preachers, they are designed to convert enemy followers to your cause. preachers could be used to devastating effect and boosting your own ranks with your enemy's men as they're converted. Preachers could convert any type of follower, with the exception of the enemy preachers and the enemy shaman. In order to build an effective fighting force, you need to have preachers accompany your men in battle in order to counter enemy preachers. Otherwise, you'll likely lose your entire group of followers that you're sending into battle. Fire warriors, who are quite possibly the most overpowered followers that you can have. These men have the ability to shoot fire from their hands at enemies and to absolutely devastating effect. They could be used for both offensive and defensive purposes. For instance, you could build guard towers with fire warriors in them and they shoot fire at the incoming enemy units. The more you have, the more devastating effect they have. An absolute must when defending those borders. And they can be used, as I mentioned, in an offensive way. They have the ability to fire at enemy warriors from distance and prove useful in killing those irritatingly placed preachers who would stop an attack dead and convert large swathes of your attacking force to the enemy. If you had a lot of these guys, they were lethal. Next we have spies. Now, spies are interesting followers who would be able to change their tribal colours and blend in with enemy followers. They would be specifically used for sabotage and would set alight enemy buildings. I'll be completely honest with you, I never really used spies and rarely ever built the spy huts to train them even after uncovering the technology. The reason being is I found them rather useless and quite ineffective. The buildings they burned were easily rebuildable and they were pretty much discovered after burning one building each and every single time. The computer/AI was far too effective at identifying them and making them essentially a slightly pointless type of follower. If you have ever found a way to effectively use them, please let me know in the comments. And finally we have the Braves, the foundation of your tribe. You begin each level with 6 Braves and they are the only followers who have the ability to build or repair buildings within your settlement. Braves are primarily responsible for building, or for the building aspect I should say, of your settlement, but they can also be trained into any of the followers mentioned above. They have relatively no other purpose, with maybe the exception of residing in houses to replenish mana and to extend those houses. What can happen with buildings is that houses can be built from 3 to 4 to 5 person houses over a period of time, and they are essentially upgraded, with Braves conducting that work. Moving on to the levels themselves are also very interesting and quite unique in the way that they're set up. Firstly, each level has its own separate world. So what you would do is you would jump from world to world as you expunge your enemies, meaning each planet, if you will, has its own elements and terrain to contend with. Some levels consist of mountainous areas which make them hard to traverse, but allow you to build guard towers and be given forewarning on advancing enemies. Or you could have low-lying terrain where the erode spell would plunge enemy land and buildings into the sea. You really could use the surrounding area to your advantage and also build out a winning strategy based on this. The levels naturally increase in difficulty as you progress through the worlds, each level bringing its own challenges, and some levels are incredibly unique. As an example, there's the Angel of Death level. Those who have played the game know exactly what I'm referring to, but the short story is that very early on in the game you have 15 minutes to build up an army, push through the enemy encampment and pray to the Angel of Death stone. If you're successful, you'll have 6 to 7 Angel of Deaths, which to me looked like dragons to be fair, who then decimate the enemy, fail, and they decimate you. There's also the level where your shaman is imprisoned and you need to build up your army and sail them across the ocean to save her. The trick here is you have to manage this without any spells. Finally, my favourite is the Armageddon level. Honestly, I could probably create an entire video on how awesome this level is. All tribes are active on this unique world, and the layout means you're exposed on your flanks, but the goal is to worship the stone in the centre of the map until you achieve the Armageddon spell. It's a level that's just pure chaos and a bundle of fun, specifically at the end when all sides fire into one little circular pit, and whoever is left standing is the winning tribe. There are so many unique levels within this game that I just can't mention them all, but let me know in the comments what specifically your favourite level was when you were playing Populous at the beginning. Moving on to spells, you will also unlock the spells for your shaman throughout your journey to completing the game, in the same way you unlock buildings and the new types of followers that I previously mentioned. These spells consist of weather spells like firestorms, tornadoes and lightning, all the way to plagues of locusts and hypnotising enemy followers for a short period of time to wreak havoc within their own ranks. There's deadly swamps, which kill any enemies that walk through it, volcanoes, and the ultimate spell, the Angel of Death. The more powerful the spell, the longer it takes to recharge said spell to use again. The spells, in conjunction with the follower types that I've mentioned, can be used to devastating effects to hinder enemy tribes and set yourself up to take full advantage of their misery. Only your shaman can conjure these spells, and can only do it when in close proximity to the location you cast said spell. You cannot just simply do it from anywhere on the map. The spells themselves recharge through mana, which is gained by braves residing within houses or by killing enemy shaman. I do at times find it difficult to put into words how incredible this game really is. It's such a nostalgia hit, and honestly, it is the first game I ever played where I truly loved it enough to keep playing, to keep going back, and to really just replay it over and over again. It's easily within the top 5 games I've ever played, and a strong contender for #1 spot. And that's down simply to the huge amounts of fun I have playing this game. Each time I play it, it feels like it could be for the first time. It also doesn't suffer the same issue of a lack of replayability that other games from this era had. Each time I replay it, it does feel different, and you can use different tactics to alter the landscape and change the way that the computer will attack you. You could play the same level 5 times, and the different things will happen on each and every different occasion. For a game released in 1998, it is simply quite breathtaking the level of detail the developers went to make this game such a success. You can see this from the level to level detail created that makes them feel vastly different to one another, allowing you as the player, or God in this case, to craft your own world, manipulate the terrain and defeat your enemies in multiple different ways. As I mentioned, you could play the same level 5 times over, and I guarantee you that you'd be able to find 5 different ways to defeat your enemies. The complexity of certain levels as well also shows a huge degree of care went into development, and little details such as the ray of light from the heavens as the cursor on the launch screen is just such a wonderful little touch. Other minute details are the way some of the followers bow and worship your shaman if she's within a certain distance of them. And finally, the celebrations that occur when winning a level. Your followers would literally go nuts. They're delirious. It all adds to a unique feeling you get when playing this game, a feeling that you're playing something that's just really very, very special. The only thing that I could ever think of as a way to improve this game would be a difficulty setting, especially for those of us that has completed this game hundreds of times over and wish for a different type of challenge. There's no difficulty levels, and simply play the game as it is. If you want to give the game a try, I managed to find it again through a company called GOG or GOG. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to give it a try for yourself. I think I bought it for around £3 to £4 Great British pounds, so not overly expensive and certainly well worth having in your digital library. Anyway, that's all from me on this one. I could honestly do a full game walkthrough on this and talk you through each level in incredible detail as to why everything is just so simply unique. Who knows? Maybe in the future, eh? But for now, GWF signing off. Ciao.